Hello, everybody. Good morning or good afternoon, according to what part of the world are you in. And thank you very much for joining us today. Welcome to this launch event of the Innovative Citizen Participation and New Democratic Institution Catching the Deliberative Wave report. It's really great to see so many people with us here today, more than 100. Just for your information, this is also streamed live in the Oecd TV for the 2,000 and something colleagues at the Oecd that might be joining us today. And it's also recorded and will be reproposed in the future in other settings. My name is Alessandro Bellantoni, and I'm the head of the Oecd Open Government Unit, within which this report was conceived as the first systematic assessment of representative deliberative processes, like citizens' assemblies and juries and their good practices. More than that, this report looks ambitiously at the future of our democracy and how to institutionalize deliberative practices so that citizens can play a meaningful and ongoing role in shaping public decisions for better policies and services. This, of course, requires a shift in thinking about the relationship between governments and citizens, and it's something that has been at the fore of the Oecd work for sure, but more importantly, of the world for many years already. So even though this report was written before the COVID-19 crisis and before the Black Lives Matter protest started, two clearly defining events of 2020, we think and hope that the findings of this report are even more salient in these circumstances. What we found in doing this research is that citizens' deliberation is particularly useful for helping to solve three types of public issues. First, when there are values-driven dilemmas. Secondly, when there are complex problems that require some sort of trade-offs. And thirdly, long-term issues that go beyond the short-term incentives of electoral cycles. Representative deliberative processes have also been effective at helping overcome political deadlock and polarization, as of course many of you know very well, since you have been the key player of these processes. For example, the Irish citizens' assemblies that tackled issues like same-sex marriage and abortion were very important precursors to the referendums that ushered in historic change on these two issues that were polarizing the country for decades. Some public authorities have already established citizens' panels to help them guide what COVID-19 recovery plans should focus on, like the West Midlands Combined Authority in the UK. While the pandemic was new and unexpected, the ongoing Black Lives Matter protests are the culmination of generations of unjust treatment against Black people and other marginalized communities across the globe. It would be naive to suggest that one single deliberative process could help solve entrenched injustice overnight, as action is needed not just by governments, but also individuals and organizations in their day-to-day lives and operations as well. That being said, these two events of 2020 are catalysts for accelerating a rethinking of our democratic institutions, for them to be more inclusive, more effective, more collaborative, and more deliberative. The example that we're in this report of institutionalizing, the example that we explore in this report of institutionalizing representative citizens' deliberation, so that a wide diversity of citizens can actually play a meaningful role in setting the agenda and in shaping policies permanently, can hopefully offer some inspiration. For the next 20 minutes, you will hear from three speakers about these ideas that I just mentioned. First of all, my colleague Claudia Schwalitz, who is in charge of the Oecd work on innovative citizen participation and is one of the main authors of this report. She will provide the big picture overview of the report's findings that hopefully will inform the conversation that will follow. She will speak for a little longer than in the original agenda, for 12 minutes, but we think it's important that you get a sense of what we have discovered and what we would like to discuss in the 30 minutes of questions that we will leave at the end. Unfortunately, Oliver Pasch, the Prime Minister of the Ost-Belgian community in Belgium, unfortunately could not participate, and he sends his apologies. However, Anna Quadvlieg, who is the head of the Department for External Relations, will be speaking on his behalf today. Thanks to Mr. Pash's leadership, Oecd has become known as the trailblazer of democratic innovation, being the first place in the world to put in place a permanent Citizens Council that gives citizens agenda setting power. Last and not least, of course, we are delighted to have our own Katu Olkari, the head of the governance public unit in the Finnish Ministry of Finance, but also the chair of the OECD Working Party on Open Government, where all the OECD members discuss this kind of issues. And she's here today with us to share her reflections on these issues from the perspective of a public official. I would also like to introduce and thank Nathan Heller from The New Yorker, who will be moderating the discussion and the Q&A later. By the way, you will see there is a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. Please use it to write your questions. Nathan will look at them and present them to the panelists. Nathan contributed to the New Yorker series on the future of democracy, notably an excellent long read about deliberative democracy that we recommend, and where he asked the question, if government is for the people, why can't the people do the governing? I'll be happy to listen to his elaboration on the answer during the next segment. So thank you very much, all of you, for joining us today. Again, please use the Q&A button to ask questions. And now I'm happy to turn the floor to my colleague Claudia, who will give you the overview of the report, and then we'll get back with your questions. Claudia, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you very much, Alessandro. I am just setting up my screen share here. Is everybody able to see this? Yes, I see some nodding. Realize I can't actually see everyone. So great. Thank you, Alessandro, for this introduction and for setting out the context in which we'll be discussing the OECD's new report on the deliberative wave. It's really a great pleasure to be sharing this research with you after a year of work. And I'd also really like to thank and acknowledge my colleague Yeva Chesnulaitite, who is connected here today and who helped me write it. As my time is short, though, I'm going to dive right in, and I look forward to answering your questions during the discussion. First, to be really clear about what we're talking about today, we're talking about representative deliberative processes, which are the focus of this report. Now, what does this mean? It refers to examples such as the Citizens Reference Panel on Pharmacare in Canada. So this was a process that happened in October 2016, where 35 randomly selected Canadians met in Ottawa to consider whether there are better models that can improve access to prescription drugs. Over 5 days, they heard from a group from a wide range of experts. They examined different options, and together they developed a set of clear, detailed, collective recommendations for Canada's health ministers and policymakers. Another example you might be more familiar with is the Irish Citizens Assembly in 2016 to 2018, which provided recommendations to special parliamentary committees about the issues of abortion, fixed-term parliaments, referendums, population ageing, and climate change. A last example I'll leave you with for now is the French Citizens Convention on Climate, where 150 people randomly selected from across France to be representative of the population met from October 2019 until June 2020 to deliver recommendations on how France can lower its greenhouse gas emissions by 40% compared to 1990 levels in a way that is socially just.
Claudia, I'm very sorry, we can also see. Sorry, we see your notes and your slides a bit small. Full screen, please.
Sorry?
Could you make your slides full screen, please?
Right, okay. I'm not sure there's a way I can do that. Let me see. So I have to share it like this, basically, then?
Or maybe Yeva can share it.
Okay. Okay, sorry, small technical issue that we didn't realize that this would be the case. If I keep it like this, is that okay? That might be a bit faster than getting Yeva to reset it up and to share it.
That is okay. We see your whole screen.
Yeah, I mean, I realize you'll see a little bit my notes and so on, but that's okay. So continuing on, there are three criteria. I just had a note, and there's no strange things in my notes, so it'll be okay. So all of these three examples, as well as all of the other examples that are in this OECD report, have three criteria in common, which are representativeness, deliberation, and impact. Representativeness meaning that participants are randomly selected and demographically stratified. Deliberation meaning, deliberation is something that requires time. So how we operationalize this is that all case studies have at least one full day of face-to-face meetings. And the third being impact, meaning all of the examples have been commissioned by a public authority that is then able to act and respond to the recommendations. So what this means in practice is that there's a small group of people who are representative of the wider population, who are given the time and the resources to be able to come together, to learn, to deliberate with one another, and to collectively draft recommendations on a specific issue for a public authority. Now, why is this a focus for the OECD and for this report? There's a few reasons. The first one being that the OECD recommendation of the Council on Open Government recommends that adherence grant all stakeholders, including citizens, equal and fair opportunities to be informed and consulted and actively engaged in all phases of the policy cycle, and also to promote innovative ways to effectively engage with stakeholders to source ideas and co-create solutions. So by their design, representative deliberative processes meet a lot of these criteria of equal and fair opportunities, providing opportunities for people to provide not just top-of-mind opinions, but more informed inputs. And they're one of the most innovative forms of citizen participation today. Beyond that, though, and in doing this research, we found that there were a number of reasons why, in particular, representativeness and deliberation have a number of benefits. The first being that they result in better policy outcomes because deliberation results in public judgments rather than just top-of-mind public opinions. Second, is there's greater legitimacy to make hard choices for public decision makers. Third is that they have the potential to enhance public trust in government and democratic institutions by giving citizens an effective role in public decision making. Fourth, they signal civic respect and empower citizens. And fifth, they make governance more inclusive by opening the door to more representative and more diverse groups of people. Sixth, they strengthen integrity and prevent corruption by ensuring that groups and individuals with money and power cannot have undue influence on a public decision. And seventh, the research and examples that we have come across show that representative deliberative processes can also help to counteract polarization and disinformation. But beyond all these reasons and benefits, there's also one more reason why representative deliberative processes in particular have been the focus for this research, and that's because there has been an increasing use in the number of these processes over time. Public authorities have been using them since, and sorry, just to add also that there's been an increase, but there also has not been a systematic analysis of how they work, what sorts of issues they work well for, and what sorts of good practice principles should underpin their design. So we found examples in 289 examples, nonetheless, that met all three of these criteria for inclusion. Now, I do want to caveat that despite our very rigorous 7-month data collection process, it is possible that even despite our best efforts, we have not found every single case that exists. So it is important to keep that in mind whenever we are looking at this data together. But that being said, there have been 289 examples, and the earliest ones that meet all three criteria dating back to 1986. As you can see from here, there was also an initial peak around the year 2000 and a second peak that started around 2010 and has been growing. Now, what's not visible here is that in 2019, we calculated that there were another 30 to 40 processes that were underway or announced. So if you add that to the 24 there, you can see how the line for 2019 would really be well off the charts compared to previous years, which was really one of the reasons why we wanted to take a more systematic comparative look at what has been happening, what kind of issues have these been used for, what are the good practice principles. We found that representative deliberative processes have been used at all levels of government. 52% of examples at the local level, 30% at the regional state level, 15% at the national federal level, and 3% at the international level. I do want to point out that the 30% at the regional state level, most of those examples come from Canada and Australia, which are two very federal countries. So most of those issues would actually be considered national level issues in Europe. And finally, we found that there have been a wide range of issues for which public authorities have commissioned these types of processes. So urban planning, health, environment, strategic planning, and infrastructure come out on top. But as you can see from this graph here, there's a wide range of other issues that go from gender equality to transportation to public services. And there's a lot of examples on lots of different topics. Beyond this though, and based on the extensive data analysis that we collected, we also worked with an expert advisory group to draft a set of good practice principles for deliberative processes for public decision making. These also went through a public consultation and were reviewed and approved by the OECD Working Party on Open Government. So they've gone through quite a long and stringent development process. I have them up here, but I'm not going to go through them all in detail now because of time. Through the QR code that's up on the screen, it brings you to the page with the report where there's also an ability to download the principles separately. I'm also happy to pick up on questions about them in the Q&A. But beyond looking at individual processes, we also looked beyond that at reimagining democratic institutions, looking at why and how to embed public deliberation. So this report is also the first to systematically analyze the institutionalization of representative deliberative processes, including 14 different examples of how public deliberation has been embedded into policymaking cycles and governance arrangements to become a more permanent part of the way public decisions are taken. So why do this? Why institutionalize? I think you can take the whole list of things I said earlier on about why deliberation, why representativeness, and then on top of that, you have another set of reasons. As Alejandro mentioned in the introduction, there are three main types of problems that deliberative processes are well suited to help address, being values-driven dilemmas, complex problems that require trade-offs, and long-term issues that go beyond electoral cycles, and also where there might be political deadlock. So institutionalizing the use of deliberation allows public decision makers to take more of these kinds of hard decisions. Second is that by creating the infrastructure, it allows policymakers to then conduct deliberation more easily and less expensively. In the long term, it has the potential to help increase public trust. Fourth, it helps to enrich democracy by expanding meaningful citizen participation. And fifth, it can help strengthen the civic capacity of citizens by allowing more people to have more opportunities to really flex their civic muscles. Now, if the ideal behind institutionalization is to give every citizen an opportunity to be selected at least once in their lives to be part of a deliberative process, because they're happening at all levels of government and on all sorts of issues on an ongoing basis, then this has a real potential to change the democratic fabric of society. Now, in this report, we looked at three different approaches to how institutionalization has been happening so far. One being a permanent or ongoing structure for representative citizen deliberation being created or established. So an example of this is the Oecd Citizens Council, which Anna will tell us about shortly. The second route being to introduce requirements for organizing representative deliberative processes under certain conditions. So this can refer to, for example, to have a deliberative process before a ballot measure happens. An example of this being the Citizens Initiative Review in Oregon. And third, to have rules allowing citizens to demand a representative deliberative process on a specific issue. Now, this usually means that there's enough signatures that have been gathered by citizens that want to have a deliberative process about something in particular. Such rules exist in many Polish cities and also in the Austrian state of Vorarlberg. But thank you very much for listening. I think I've already covered quite a bit of content, but this is really just a small snapshot of what's in the report. Through the QR code here, again, you're able to access directly the page where it's available. The report also covers 12 different models of deliberative processes and goes into detail about how success can be measured. The report page also includes a shorter highlights document for those who aren't able to go through the whole report. The separate document about the good practice principles. We've also made the full database of case studies available open access online, and there are some further resources there. But I will leave it there, and thank you very much for listening. I look forward to hearing your questions later on.
Well, thank you very much, Claudia. And you did really well in summarizing a very long and dense report in 11 minutes. So I will not, or 12, I will not waste
and sorry for my notes mishap.
I said you learn new things each time. Absolutely. So thank you, Claudia, for this. We'll get back to you soon. Now I'm happy to turn it over to Anna Kwadvig from Belgium, and I'm sure I mispronounced both your name and the name of your country, so I apologize for that. But we're really interested in your views, especially what had your Prime Minister, government and Parliament in mind when they thought to create a deliberative institution in your community. Being the first in the world, it's interesting for us to understand what brought you there, and also a little bit about how you managed to make it happen, because it doesn't seem to be as easy as probably, or hopefully it was for you. So Anna, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much for having invited the German-speaking community. Although I'm not the person that you expected to talk to, I'm very pleased that our citizens' participation model finds your interest. Our parliament and our government have decided to implement a unique and very far-reaching deliberative citizen participation model. And we believe that it makes sense to share our experiences with many others in order to get feedback, and also to make our model an example for those who want to follow. I would like to use these couple of minutes I have to explain why we established our model and how we went about making it happen, and then what it looks like today. Well, to start, I think many of you share the experiences we made and many other regions all over Europe and beyond made in the past years. We are facing a disaffection with politics, which is expressed in a declining voters' participation and in massive left and right-wing populism gaining ground in our societies. So in East Belgium, we count on transparency, on communication and participation to respond to these developments. And while transparency and communication are yet part of our daily business, we are still looking for participation tools, or we were looking. So we started to look for good practices in that field. And in 2017, our parliament also started a pilot project with the Citizens Dialogue on childcare. It was around that time, so in late 2017, that our Minister President made David van Rijbroek for the first time, and they talked about the book Against Elections, in which David van Rijbroek points out the weaknesses of today's representative democracy, and he also proposes alternatives. And David is one of the founders of the G1000 in Belgium, so he has quite some experience in citizens' participation. And one of his most interesting ideas was to set up a two-chamber system in which one chamber is elected by the citizens and another is drawn by lot. Well, after that first talk, in the next step, our Minister President, and this time together with the President of our Parliament, they met David again, and this time together with a group of Belgian experts to explore some of these ideas in more detail and to discuss their potential application in East Belgium. During this conversation, it was like they all recognized the possibilities that were open to them. For the first time, a chamber drawn by lot could have direct influence on political decision-making, and the small East Belgium could become a model for other regions worldwide. So there were still some challenges. First, a viable model had to be developed, and second, the goal was to achieve unanimous approval in Parliament so that there would be a stable basis for this new form of participation. Then, together with the Foundation for Future Generations, we invited around 15 experts from all over the world. And they not only developed the basic framework of our current model, but this was very important. They also spoke to all parties represented in our parliament. So what happened was that the politicians let the experts speak, and in this way, they lift the debate out of the party discourse in order to involve the governing parties and the opposition together in the process right from the start. And the result of this approach was that on 25th of February 2019, our parliament has voted unanimously to institutionalize citizens drawn by lot in political decision-making. So that's how the Ostbelgien model is now anchored in legislation. Let me briefly explain what our citizens' dialogue looks like. We have one citizen council that consists of 24 members who hold their seat for a year and a half. And they propose policy recommendations to the elected parliament. They can either do so on the council's own initiative or after request, for instance, by a parliamentary group or by at least 100 East Belgian citizens. Normally, those members convene once a month. And this council, again, relies on recommendations drafted by independent citizens' assemblies, which are also drawn by lot. These assemblies last about 3 weekends over 3 months, and they have a maximum of 50 members. The composition of both bodies, the Citizen Council and the assemblies, needs to be representative in terms of gender, age, education, and residence. And all the people living in East Belgium, that means not only the Belgians, but also the many German inhabitants we have or other foreigners, at the age of 16 can be chosen to be part of the Citizens' Assembly or of the council as well. And an interesting effect is that statistically speaking, every East Belgian will participate in this form of political dialogue at least once in his life. And then for the administrative and organizational support of the council and the assemblies, there's also a permanent secretary who, for instance, sends the invitations, invites experts for the different policy fields to be discussed, etc. And there were also two important things that were important for the government and the parliament. And this is first, that it's not mandatory for the citizens to participate, but there is a daily fee that is given to those who do. And second, the government has to respond to the recommendations. And even if it will not implement these recommendations, it must explain why it does not. Well, okay, that was just a short summary. You can also look it up on our website. And concerning the process up to March, the first Citizen Council was established in 2019, in September 2019. And has selected the topic of how to improve care conditions for staff and for patients. And I think this choice of topic is a sign that we can have confidence in this new form of deliberative democracy. I will leave it for that now. If you have questions, feel free to ask. I hope I will be able to answer later. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Anna, very much. I'm not allowed to comment, but thank you very much for this short overview on how you did it, and it's incredible how bipartisan this decision was. It's something that struck me as very unique of your community. So, anyway, congratulations for this exercise and for doing it successfully. Now, the floor goes to Katju from the government of Finland, and in particular, we would like to understand a little bit your reflections on why do you think that this new form of democracy, deliberative democracy, could be relevant today in Finland, and how civil servants like you, like your colleagues, could actually benefit from engaging with citizens through deliberation as a new modality. Thank you, Katju.
Thank you very much, Alessandro, and thank you for this possibility to join this great conversation today. I think it's really excellent that we have such a wonderful package of evidence from the OECD on the deliberative wave and innovative citizen participation. And so I do want to try and answer why is this important and why is it especially important now. And I would like to give you 3 reasons why the deliberative wave and this evidence base that we have got from the OECD is important for our governments, at least for the Finnish government, especially now. And my first why is trust. And you know that trust is an utmost crucial thing for our governments, and not just citizens' trust in government, but also vice versa. And also the trust of different actors in society vis-a-vis each other. And we may have seen some strengthening of trust now due to the COVID-19 crisis, but we know to expect that this might not last once we are heading towards some challenging recovery decisions. So the deliberative processes are one way to show trust from government to other actors and thus strengthen this connection. And it's also a way to make better policies and through that strengthen trust. Therefore, we are in a space in time where we need to use these deliberative and innovative ways that have proven themselves to work and use them in a wider and larger scale than before. And my second why is that our societies are everybody's business. What I mean with that is that one worry that we in governments have had already before, and where the concern has grown due to the corona crisis, is the possibility of increasing polarization in our society and the pessimisms toward future that comes along with it. The crisis has hit hard those who are already less well off and often not as vocal in our societies. And what our societies need now is hope, and that nobody feels like an outsider. And the deliberative processes enable that we can have all groups of our society involved, and what's more, in an early stage, because that is a thing that otherwise seems always to pose big challenges for us. And another big challenge that we are often facing is to make sure that we're not just building new fancy ways for elites to participate. We need to pay particular attention in safeguarding and developing the participation possibilities of the society's most vulnerable groups. Can be youth, elderly, migrants, for example. And this is, at least in my own country, a growing concern. My own current government, our Finnish government, has made 6 pledges in its program, and to mention 2 of them, one is a new kind of interaction between government and the different groups in society, and the other example of those pledges is that of a fair and equal treatment between generations. And as a tool for these pledges, we have in our democracy program put emphasis on increasing the use of citizen panels, because they answer to many of these needs. And I'm quite envious of the Belgian case, so we are not there yet, but we are going, hopefully heading that way. But here also the fact that was already mentioned too, that the deliberative processes can help counteract polarization and disinformation is of great importance. And my third why is doing together. This is always the tough part. It's much easier for us in the public administration, in the civil service, to emphasize importance in a strategy paper, but it is more difficult to start real action and even more difficult to carry it through to implement these. Therefore, I think it's really marvelous that the OECD has collected such wealth of evidence and data that support the idea that citizen participation in public decision-making can deliver better policies and strengthen democracy and build trust. And now that we have this evidence-based, this really huge report, a massive amount of information, different kinds of information, there is a better possibility to move forward with this in the right way. And always, but especially after the corona crisis, I think we need to be able to demonstrate that we are really doing things together with different groups in our societies and to build joint understanding and trust. And we know that when crises come, people look more favorably, perhaps to their old, slightly forgotten friend, the government. And this is good because government needs friends, but we also need as a government to demonstrate that everybody is a friend and that we trust them. And this is what is good in deliberative processes. I think that they speak of the trust that government has for all the groups in the society. And in this way, it's a way to turn our words into action. Thank you. These were just some of the thoughts of why this is important. There's a lot of other things as well, but wanted to give you these 3 why examples. So thank you very much for this possibility. I'll be happy to answer if there are any questions later.
Thank you, Katju. Really, thank you very much. It's always very inspiring to hear all the efforts that a country like Finland with an established democracy is still doing to improve its democracy. And it's also very good to hear from public officials that they realize that trust is a two-way experience. So thank you for your testimony. Nathan, now the floor is yours to animate the conversation. Thank you very much in advance.
Okay, and excellent. I will ask a few of the questions, and then I see that a lot of you have already added questions of your own, and we can add a few of those. And you can also, I don't know if you can see on the screen, there's a way to vote on them with the finger, and so it's sort of an open process. I had a question for you, Claudia, at the beginning, because I've heard a lot about polarization and disinformation and the erosion of a public trust. And I'm wondering, in the research, to what extent was the deliberative process emerging as a remedy for that?
Great, thanks, Nathan. I think that's a really good question and something that a lot of people have on their minds in various contexts. I mean, in the US, I guess, where you are, there's a lot of polarization in many different ways happening right now, but it's been a constant, I think, theme of our politics for some time. In the introduction to the report, I think we characterized the last number of years as being a time of pessimism, polarization, and populism. So it's not new per se, but deliberative processes, I mean, I'm not going to say that they are some sort of magic bullet to help this situation. That's not the case, but there is research and evidence to show that when they take place and when there is good public communication around them as well, then they can be a tool for public learning. They can be a tool to bring people together. So some of the work that has been done For instance, around the Irish Citizens Assembly, by the researchers studying it afterwards, showed that because of the extensive public communication that happened, there was a huge amount of media coverage. All of the sessions were live streamed, so all of the times where the participants heard from both the experts and the stakeholders for both sides of the issue, the wider public then became aware of the fact that, you know, this process had happened, that it involved a representative group of people, that they heard from a wide diversity of perspectives. It wasn't stacked in any way, and it helped to create some trust in that process, knowing that everyone was having access to that same information. There's also evidence that we cite in the report, which I won't go into detail now, so we have more time for questions, but I'll direct people to it if they're interested, about how deliberation can be an effective way to help overcome ethnic, religious, and ideological divisions that have between groups that have historically found their identity in rejecting that of the other. So there's work that's specifically cited there in countries such as Belgium and Colombia and a few other cases, which I don't remember all of them off the top of my head, but they're in there for further reference.
And Anna, I'm curious. I'm sure that a question that a number of people have is about the process of institutionalizing. Would you be able to discuss a few of the challenges which emerged and how they were they were resolved?
Yes, one of the biggest advantages in our case was that the politicians themselves, they wanted to institutionalize this process. So our government wanted it. And then to convince all the parties of the parliament, it was very important to involve them in this process of implementation. They had time to discuss. This has been discussed for about a year before it became part of our legislation, and the members of the parliament talked themselves to the experts. In the end, as I said, we had a unanimous result, so there were no main challenges for us. Yeah, but I think the main point was to give them also the time to discuss and also to discuss with the experts.
Okay. And Katju, you, I mean, have been working on open policy making for a very long time. We have heard a lot about the deliberative wave, and I'm curious whether you have become aware of a more sort of a receptive environment, and if so, do you think that is because because of all the models are clearer, or do you think that it is because of something else that's going on in the world at the moment?
That is also a very good question, and I was thinking about that earlier, and I think this is from the Finnish context, I would say. I think that because these emerged, like we saw Claudia's picture where we had this already in the 2000s, and there was a lot of interest towards the experiments also and cases of some of the panels, for instance, in Finland at that time. And I think we were quite close in almost doing something. But I think that we had so many in the kind of earlier stage. These are more innovative and more kind of advanced tools maybe of open government, and like, of course, like Claudia said, we did all of them, so this is not the one magic bullet, but I think we had some groundwork to do with other things, like more on the consultation side, doing that better, starting new platforms or online for discussions, and I think that all has kind of prepared for us that we're more ready and more receptive to this now. So I think it's a building of culture, and we needed to do other things first, or at least that has kind of paved the path now. So I think this momentum is really good because we have done our other homework, and now it would be time for this. This is a more kind of a feeling than based on the very in-depth analysis. But this is having been for a longer practitioner, I think this would be my answer. And I also think that this helps this evidence, and Finland also, I think, always the international. If there are good examples, that's always very, very helpful, because our politicians always ask, is there some cases where this has worked? Because they are also afraid of letting people down by doing something that is not functioning. So I think now the environment is more ready for this, definitely.
Okay. And there's a very interesting a devil's advocate question from Ellen Londemort about empiricism. What is the measure, I mean, of success, and how do you, and how do you know that is a sufficient measure? And maybe Claudia, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, thanks, Nathan, and thanks, Ellen, for the question. I'm just pulling it up here, one of the first ones. I mean, I can rely on you for asking a good technical question like this one. No, I mean, this is a long and ongoing debate in the field of deliberative democracy. I don't want to diverge too far into the theoretical debates on this question, but the chapter around how do we measure success around deliberative processes is, I think, the longest one in the whole report. So in no way I'm going to do it justice in a minute or two here, but there's different aspects that we look at which are also related to the good practice principles in terms of looking at, you know, is the random selection done in such a way as to inspire confidence in the fact that everybody really had an equal chance of being selected in the first place? Is it done in a way where there's actually that representative group of people? Is the deliberation designed in a way where there is really a diversity of information that is presented to participants, so that they're hearing from all different sides of the story, and also that participants themselves have the ability to request more or additional information if they feel like they still haven't fully understood something, or they feel like they haven't heard from all aspects of it. I mean, success also depends on the independence of the facilitation and the moderation. It depends on a whole host of issues. So it's not just dependent on one thing, but empirically, I think there are different ways that you can measure the extent to which a deliberative process has been done well. Afterwards, of course, the measure of success is, I think, to what extent are the recommendations that come out of it actually useful for policymakers who commission such a process. And here we have some evidence from the report that suggests that in the vast majority of cases, policymakers implement at least half of the recommendations that come out of these processes. And we have to also, when you look into the reports, there was also some more qualitative work that we did to look at the final sets of recommendations from all of these different cases that are in the report. And you see that there's really a depth of thinking, which is just incomparable to any list you will come across on an online public consultation where people can write their opinion on a topic without having to first go through a learning process and go through a process of having to hear from a diversity of other people about what they also think and experience on that issue. So I will leave it there, but happy to continue the debate later on with Ellen and others.
Excellent. I wanted to move on. There's I mean, a very interesting question from Kieran Breen about the challenges of a deliberative body working with a strongman politician who perhaps is not particularly interested in compromise, or even in the opinion of the public. There are, I mean, a few of them in the world at the moment. I don't know who would like to respond to that, but it's a very interesting question. I wonder whether you have any thoughts. Will cut you.
Well, this is also something that I think I would answer from a Finnish context, and I would maybe say that we have felt that when it comes to these kinds of issues, that it has been easier almost to convince politicians than the highest level civil servants before. I think now I think we have the support of both groups, but I think politicians in Finland have been more in favor. What I mentioned earlier, I think the one thing was that they maybe feel that they need to have more evidence, that they don't let people down. But then also we know that there are always people who are who think that these things don't work. But once we have got them along, we haven't had these kinds of panels, but we have, for instance, dialogues with citizens, and those who are the most resistant to join beforehand, and then you just kind of get them to experiment. They are always the most pleased in the end, because it's a big eye opener when they realize how much they can get from listening to other people's voices than just their own. So I think the tough part is getting convincing, but I think Finnish people are often up to the challenge when you just say that please try if there is evidence. This was not a very kind of well, not maybe a little bit blurred answer, sorry about that, but these are just some thoughts around that subject. Yeah.
Is there anybody else who had any thoughts on that, or should I move on to another question?
Oh, I think given we don't have a huge amount of time left, it might be nice to get one more question.
Okay. This is a sort of a timely question from Mary Claire, and that is, do we have a sense of whether the deliberative process is working better in person, or can it work? Equally well online, for example, in a format of this kind. Perhaps Claudia, if you would like to begin.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to share my thoughts on this. I was thinking maybe perhaps Anna might want to share a little bit about whether they're adapting anything online in Oecd, and then I'm also happy to share my thoughts on this, perhaps when I do some concluding thoughts after.
Okay. Anna.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, in East Belgium, for instance, the process stopped in March. So there was an assembly drawn by lots who should discuss the topic of healthcare, but the process was stopped because not everybody has the same possibility to join in video conferences, particularly in rural areas like the German-speaking community. So I don't know if there are plans to do online video conferences if the situation doesn't change, and if we do not have the possibility to meet in person from September on. If there's the possibility, I think they will definitely continue the process by meetings in person. because they, yeah, I think we all make the experience that there is a difference, and you can rather discuss things in depth if you are in a room with others and not interrupted by others, and yeah, maybe not visible for others, yeah, things like that. So the technical the video conferences can be an option if there's no other solution, but if there is another solution, the meetings in person are the better one.
Excellent.
Okay, thanks. I'll jump in and say a few words as well, and then given that we're at the last minute, I'll also wrap up and do some concluding thoughts. That went by super fast, and I wish we could have answered more questions, but that's always the case, and I think we'll have other opportunities as we'll be doing other events too. But on this question about online, I think it's really important, and I mean, I don't think it's, I mean, I think people have noticed that in this report, all of the examples are face-to-face only, and that's not to say you can't do some things online, but then you're comparing apples to oranges as well. So, you know, we are interested in these questions on our Participo platform. We have a whole series about digital for deliberation. So it's not something that's completely excluded, but it does just raise a whole other set of challenges. Like Anna just said, not everyone has internet access, not everyone has a laptop or a computer at home. And then there's other challenges like, you know, when we're online on Zoom like this, or worse, if we're writing by text, you don't get those interactions that come from having the coffee break, the dinners, those social moments where it's actually really important for people to build a bit of trust between each other, which is a prerequisite to then be able to talk about those polarizing issues like we were talking about earlier. That doesn't just magically happen on its own, and you need to create the time for people to feel comfortable having those more difficult discussions as well. So I'll leave it there. There's a whole series, like I was saying, on Participo, which leads me to my summing up points about what we're doing next, because this report has launched today and we're very excited to have it out, but that's not the end of the story, and we're doing a lot more work on the future of democracy at the OECD. So we're working on some more concrete guidance for policymakers that builds on this, guidance about, you know, how to decide and choose on what kind of deliberative model is most appropriate depending on the situation, guidance about evaluation standards. We're also continuing our series on Participo on digital for deliberation, and also another one on new democratic institutions. But beyond this, we're also working with countries to help them implement deliberative practices, and, you know, integrating this a bit into our core business and way of working. So deliberative processes, notably for some of our work around civic space, will involve a deliberative component as well. So Alessandro's nodding, I don't think I've missed anything. So I'll just take this opportunity to thank Alessandro, thank Nathan, Katju, Anna for being here today and for your time and your thoughtful comments. Thank you also to the over 200 people who joined us for this. Really rich questions. I'm going to see if there's a way we can save them. Perhaps we can actually do a series of Participo posts where we answer some of them, because I'd quite like to come back on a lot of the things we didn't have time to talk about today. So I'll leave it there, and thank you very much, everyone, and read the report. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you very much for joining us.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.